Right then, this is the February movie review, and we're going to be getting into a bit of conjure and some a bit of voodoo and a whole lot of hoodoo with Angel Heart from 1987 and the Skeleton Key from I think it was 2005, but I'll check when we get there. Alan Park's Angel Heart, 1987, is one of those films that never quite loosens its grip on you, even decades after you've seen it. It lingers, not because it's especially fast-paced or packed with twists every 5 minutes, but because it moves with a slow, deliberate confidence, trusting atmosphere, implication, a dread more than a spectacle. This is a film that understands something that many horror and occult films miss. The true terror isn't the monster, it's the moment you realize who you are. On the surface, Angel Heart presents itself as a classic noir detective story. Mickey Rourke's Harry Angel is a down on his luck private eye in the 1950s New York, hired by the unnervingly refined Louis Cypher, played with chilling restraint by Robert De Niro. And the job is simple: find a missing singer named Johnny Favorite. Of course, nothing stays simple for long. As Angel follows the trail south, first through New York and then into the heat-soaked New Orleans, the film slowly sheds its detective skin and reveals something far darker underneath. What makes the film work is its patience. Parker allows scenes to breathe, letting unease accumulate rather than rushing towards shock. The cinematography leans heavily into shadow, sweat, and rot. Fans turn lazily in claustrophobic rooms, blood pools in ritualistic patterns, and the city itself feels complicit in the unfolding horror. New Orleans isn't just a backdrop here, it's an active presence, steeped in voodoo, Catholic guilt, and the weight of history. The occult elements never feel tacked on. They emerge organically from the setting as if this is simply what the world looks like once you start paying attention. Mickey Rourke is perfectly cast. His Harry Angel is cynical without being clever, stubborn without being heroic. He pushes forward not because he's brave, but because he's incapable of stopping. There's a grim inevitability to his performance that makes the final revelations feel earned rather than contrived. This isn't a man uncovering a mystery so much as a man encircling a truth he has spent years running from. De Niro's Louis Cypher is, by contrast, unnervingly still. His performance is all about control. Every gesture feels measured, every word chosen. He doesn't need to raise his voice or bare his teeth. The menace comes from certainty. Watching him interact with Angel, you get the sense that the outcome is already decided and the investigation is merely a formality. It's one of those performances that becomes more unsettling the more understated it is. Then there's Lisa Bonet, whose performance was controversial at the time and remains crucial to the film's power. Her character, Epiphany Proudfoot, embodies desire, danger, and spiritual inheritance all at once. The film's engagement with sexuality is deliberately uncomfortable, refusing to separate lust from violence or spirituality from the body. This is not a sanitized occultism. It's sweaty, bloody, and intimate. Rather, ritual here is not symbolic, it has consequences. What Angel Heart does exceptionally well is weave together religious symbolism without over explaining it. Christian imagery, African diasporic spirituality, and occult folklore exist side by side, often in tension, sometimes overlapping. The film trusts the audience to feel the significance, even if they don't consciously decode every symbol. This restraint is rare, and it's part of why the film still feels intelligent rather than gimmicky. The central theme, though, is identity. Angel Heart is obsessed with names, contracts, and memory. The idea that the worst damnation is not eternal fire but self-recognition runs through every frame. The horror isn't that the devil exists, it's that you made the deal, forgot you made it, and lived quite comfortably off the proceeds. When the truth finally lands, it does so with brutal clarity. There's no last minute escape hatch, no clever loophole. Justice in this world is cold and exact. Of course, the film isn't without flaws. Some pacing choices will feel slow to modern audiences, and its handling of certain cultural elements can feel exploitative rather than exploratory if viewed uncritically. But even these rough edges contribute to its rawness. Angel Heart isn't trying to be polite or safe, it's interested in transgression, guilt, and consequence. Ultimately, Angel Heart is a rare thing, an occult film that takes the occult seriously without romanticizing it. It understands that magic, like power, always exacts a price. This is not a story about fighting evil, it's about realizing you are complicit in it. That's why it endures. Not because it shocks, but because it accuses. Next, The Skeleton Key, and I was correct, it was 2005, is often dismissed as a mid-2000s supernatural thriller, but that does it a quiet disservice. Beneath its glossy surface and slow burn pacing is a film deeply concerned with belief, inheritance, and the mechanics of folk magic. When approached through its occult lens, specifically its engagement with hoodoo, the film reveals itself as far more deliberate and far more unsettling than it's usually given credit for. At the center of the story is Kate Hudson's Caroline Ellis, a hospice nurse who takes a job caring for an elderly man in a decaying plantation house deep in Louisiana Bayou. From the start, the house itself functions as a magical object. It's layered, locked, and heavy with secrets. Corridors twist, doors refuse access, and the attic becomes a forbidden sanctum. This is classic occult architecture, a space designed to conceal workings, memories, and power. The Skeleton Key is not just a plot device, but a symbolic initiatory tool, granting access not only to rooms, but to a hidden worldview. What the film does especially well is treat hoodoo not as a theatrical window dressing, but as a coherent magical system grounded in belief, practice, and consequence. Unlike many Hollywood portrayals of folk magic, hoodoo here is not vague or mystical in a decorative sense. It is specific. It involves roots, jars, powders, mirrors, and words spoken with intention. The film repeatedly emphasizes that hoodoo works through belief. Not faith in a religious sense, but a deep internalized acceptance that magic is real and operative. This becomes the film's most important occult rule, and it is never broken. Gina Rowlands and John Hurt's performances as Violet and Ben Devereaux are crucial to selling this. There's a studied frailty to them, but also something watchful, something patient. They don't rush, they wait. This is deeply in keeping with folk magic traditions where timing, repetition, and long term planning often matter more than dramatic displays of power. Their characters understand that the work has already been set in motion. All that's required is the final alignment of belief. The historical framing of hoodoo in the film is also significant by tying it to enslaved Africans and the violence of the plantation system. The Skeleton Key roots its occultism in survival rather than exoticism. Hoodoo is shown as a practical response to powerlessness, a way to reclaim agency in a world structured against you. This doesn't make it benign or moral, but it does make it human. The film refuses to present magic as either purely evil or purely spiritual. It is a tool, and like all tools, it reflects the intent of the wielder. Caroline's skepticism is where the film's occult intelligence really shines. She is intelligent, compassionate, and rational, but those qualities become liabilities. The refusal to believe in hoodoo is not framed as enlightenment, but as arrogance. The film steadily dismantles the modern assumption that disbelief is protection. In fact, disbelief becomes the mechanism through which the magic succeeds. This is a sharpened version of the usual horror trope, and it's one of the reasons the ending lands so effectively. The rituals themselves are understated but accurate enough to feel convincing. Mojo bags, graveyard dirge, mirror magic, and root work are treated with respect to their internal logic. Nothing flashy happens without groundwork. The film understands that folk magic is often about influence rather than spectacle, about nudging reality rather than tearing it open. The most powerful workings in the skeleton key happen quietly, in conversations, in trust, in the slow reshaping of perception. Visually, the film leans into decay, reflection, and enclosure. Mirrors appear again and again, not just as symbolic objects, but as functional magical tools. The house becomes a body, the attic a mind, and the mirrors a means of transfer. This spatial metaphor reinforces the film's more occult idea that identity is not fixed and that the self can be manipulated, displaced, or exchanged under the right conditions. If the film has a weakness, it's that it risks reinforcing fear-based views of African-derived spiritual practices for viewers who don't engage critically. However, for those willing to look closer, the film actually exposes ignorance rather than magic. The horror doesn't come from hoodoo itself, but from underestimating it. The true danger is not the spell, but the assumption that spells aren't real. In the end, The Skeleton Key is a rare occult film that portrays belief as a key component in the operation of magic. It doesn't rely on jump scares or demonic spectacle. Instead, it works the way hoodoo works, patiently, indirectly, and with absolute confidence in its own efficacy. By the time the final reveal arrives, it feels less like a twist and more like the inevitable completion of a work that began the moment the door was unlocked. That brings us to the end of this month's movie reviews. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Cheers for now. Bye bye.